Jim, this next one was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from William Molina Jr. Can you give examples of how wrestlers and bookers / promoters gave their notices in wrestling?
Well, I mean, the standard way was for a wrestler, at least, was to go to the booker and say, well, I'm giving my 2 weeks notice. Either, I'm not making any money, or I'm not really happy with the spot, or I've got a chance to go do something else or whatever. And you could kind of tell if they argued with you at all, or if they say, oh, no, we understand. Well, then you need to get the fuck out of there. Because if they're not even going, oh, now come on, then they had no plans for you, whatever. And sometimes, if a booker felt, well, we need the guy, but he wants to leave, but what about if he had an extra $100 a week or some whatever? There could be some negotiation, and maybe sometimes guys would stay. They just made a point. But that's the normal way that you did it back in the old days. And of course, a lot of times, as with everything else in wrestling, everything didn't always go normally. And I shouldn't, in some territories, like, was it Crockett? Crockett maybe wanted 4 weeks before contracts became a thing, because the bigger territory, and I mean Vince Sr., to stay on his good side, if he didn't give you an end date and you wanted to leave, it was probably best to give a couple months because of the way that territory worked. But otherwise, guys just would no show or would fucking get mad and yell and quit or have a big fucking whatever. As far as a booker quitting, one of the greatest booker quitting stories I ever heard was from Bill Dundee when I first got into business. Because Dundee started in Australia working for Barnett as an underneath guy when he first got into business. And he was there when, Australia, he was on the periphery of it when Australia was the biggest territory in the world. And at one point, Paul DeMarco was Barnett's booker. And Dundee said DeMarco one time came into Barnett's office with the booking book, and he stuck it out over Barnett's desk, and he dropped it, and he said, I have mastered the business, and I am done. And he turned around and left the office and went to the airport and flew back to the United States. So that, there's every kind of way to give your notice, and especially if you got creative. I mean, Terry Funk will even a note on Vince's door, was the day before the Survivor, or the day of the Survivor Series. Sorry, Vince. Had to go home and take care of a sick horse.
What about you guys in World Class? That was an interesting scenario.
We gave our notice the proper way and gave them 4 weeks, as I recall. I think we got our, Texas Stadium was first week of May, let's say May 5th or 6th. We got our check the next week. I called Crockett immediately afterwards. We had things worked out. We gave him our notice the first week of June and left and started for Crockett July 1st.
I thought you gave them a heads up when you first got there because you didn't want to go there, that you were going to be leaving.
That was the second time. That was the first time. The second time we gave our notice, we actually left and went to work for Crockett. The first time we gave our notice, we actually went over there for the first TV taping. And I've told this story before, but maybe for the younger viewers, after we had been told that we were finishing up in Mid-South and we were going around the horn with the scaffold matches with the Rock and Roll Express and put them over on the way out as they had done us earlier in the year. But they didn't tell us we were booked anywhere, and we had been waiting to go to the Carolinas because both Flair and Dusty had asked us when they had been in. So I called and made the deal to come in for Crockett, which we would have started in January of 85. But then Dundee calls and says, shit, Watts wants you to go to Dallas because he's working with Fritz and changing talent. That way we can bring you back for Oak City and Tulsa and the Superdome and the big shows. Oh, God damn it. Well, what do we do now? Well, let's go see. And actually it was December 14th or 15th or 16th, somewhere in there, before the Christmas break. We were supposed to go over and do our first TV in Dallas. And we said, well, we'll go and see. And we went over, and that of all nights, was a night that they weren't even doing their Fort Worth TV in the Will Rogers Coliseum. They were doing it in an exhibition hall at the fairgrounds because Will Rogers was booked for some holiday business. And we pull in there, and it's a goddamn big empty room. And there's probably about 600 or 700 or 800 people there, which was horrible, even for Fort Worth. And that's when we told Ken Mantell, well, we've got a start date in Charlotte, and we think we're probably going to have to do that. And that's when Ken Mantell got told Fritz, and he got on the phone to Watts, and then Watts called and shamed us, and blah, blah, blah. And so that's when I called Crockett back and said, well, we're going to have to delay this. They want us to go to Dallas. And then Crockett said, well, it's okay. It's not the first time Bill Watts has fucked me. And I'm like, oh, my God, now I'm starting a promotional war between Watts and Crockett. And, you know, we ended up, we went and did the best we could with the situation. But as we've mentioned many times before, Dallas wasn't a large roster or a large office or a large infrastructure, and they were cooling off, and the booking, Ken Mantell, was rotten, and it was so elementary, and we took it for 6 months for kind of a paid vacation because the trips were mostly short, except for South Texas, and then finally when we got that check for Texas Stadium and figured this is probably as good as it's ever going to be, and we gave our notice. And one thing, this wasn't really given notice, because we know Austin Idol was the king of actually giving notice without actually giving notice. He just wouldn't appear sometimes. And then there would always, you know, be some story afterwards that kind of tied all the loose ends up. But so this wasn't really given notice for his job, but he was working Memphis one time, and he'd made Memphis TV on Saturday morning, and Lawler wanted him. He was booked. He was advertised in Jonesboro, Arkansas that night, but he had a plane ticket to fly back to Pensacola that afternoon. And Lawler said, no, come on, you got to make Jonesboro, blah, blah, blah. I'll take you. You can ride with me, whatever. Okay, well, just take me by the airport and I'll change my ticket. So Lawler takes him over to the airport and pulls up, and Idol gets out of the car and says, I'll be right back. Lawler's sitting there waiting. Finally, he goes in. Idol got on the plane and fucking flew back to Pensacola.
There's the rib. Everyone's like, oh, he's afraid of flying. No, he's not. No, he's not.
No, he's afraid of flying anywhere he doesn't want to go. But Lawler was, next time he saw him, was like, how long were you going to leave me sitting out there? And he said, well, I knew you had to get to Jonesboro, King.
He once told me a story. Idol himself told me the story that when he was working Southeastern, he was like the top baby face in the promotion. One day he was just like, I don't want to go. And he just called Ron Fuller at home. He's like, Ron, I'm done. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, I just decided I don't want to do this anymore. And it was nothing. Ron Fuller knew him long enough to realize there was no talking him out of this. And that was it. Idol was gone. Just decided he'd rather do something else for the time being.
It's the wrong day to do it today.